Top 5, a show where we count things down from number 5 all the way to number 1. This week on the show, heist movies. In fact, our top 5 heist movies. Rodrigo, we're going to start with you this week. What do you have in your number 5?
My number 5 is a movie that I actually rewatched today. Well, a chunk of I rewatched today, because who has time to sit down and watch an entire movie nowadays? And that is Marvel's Ant-Man.
Oh, yeah.
The fun thing about the early, sort of like that second era of Marvel, is that they really went all in with, let's make each of these movies also have it be part of a genre, right? So part of the reason why people liked Winter Soldier is because it was a spy thriller. Part of the reason why people like Guardians of the Galaxy is because it's like a buddy misfit movie. And part of the reason why I think what people liked Ant-Man is because it's a heist. Obviously, it spends a lot of time up front telling you what an Ant-Man is and why you should care. Successfully or not, I suppose that's up to you. I enjoyed it. It also spends some time setting up the bad guy, which is nice because he's not a very interesting bad guy, but they spend enough time giving you the relationships as to why, again, you should care once the heist kicks on. The Ant-Man movies in general show one of the things that is sad about both Marvel movies and actually also the comics, right? Because when you're reading Spider-Man, you're in there and Betty Brant is there and Jonah Jameson is there and what's the name of Mary Jane's aunt? Who's you know how I mean. Mary Jane's aunt is in it. Mary Jane's aunt is in it, and they sort of create this also a mundane world aside from Spider-Man's supernatural world, right? Ant-Man has some really funny secondary characters, and as you progress through the Ant-Man movies, they kind of fall off, right? And that's probably the saddest thing about stuff like that. Same thing with Iron Man, same thing with probably Thor, the Warriors 3 just sort of get immolated at some point. Anyway, Ant-Man is my number 5.
Very cool. All right. My number 5 is I can't say it's the lowest budget because time periods and money's shift, but this movie was only made for $12 million, and it's got some big name stars in it. It has Chris Pine and it has Jeff Bridges in it. And I only saw this after it hit digital because, my hatred of all movie theaters that begin with A and end with C. But this is a neo-Western crime drama in which two brothers, Chris Pine and Ben Foster, they have to carry out a series of bank robberies to save their family farm. And the way that they just go, I think it's West Texas. They're just going to these small banks throughout West Texas, and they have to get these something like $1 million or something within a week in order to save the ranch. And all along, Jeff Bridges is trying to find them. And the ending of this movie is so good. You see how the first bank robbery tends to go right, but then the second bank robbery, because you're in a small town, the person who opens the bank is 10 minutes late, and these guys are waiting outside what do we do? What do we do? If you haven't seen Hell or High Water, you guys really should go and check this out. It is by Taylor Sheridan, who is the writer of this. He is also the writer of Sicario, if you haven't seen that movie, which again is another great movie, doesn't fall into the heist category. But for a $12 million movie, it is quiet, it's beautiful, and it's directed by David Mackenzie. And if I've got to double check something, another David Mackenzie film, because the ending shot that he does is almost exactly like it's not another one of his movies, but the ending shot in this movie is almost exactly like another movie that I watched around the same time, and maybe it also had Chris Pine in it. I don't remember what the connection was, but I remember just kind of being blown away that it's wow, this movie ends the same way that this other one does. But if you're looking for a fun heist movie that's got a family trying to save the farm and maybe they kill some people along the way. Hell or High Water from 2016. Matthew, what do you have for your number five?
Mine doesn't kill any families for farms or farm any killed families, but it does have one of the most amazing performances by Ray Walston that I have ever seen. Ray Walston, of course, is Mr. Hand from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and he is literally the thing that I remember most about The Sting, which is ostensibly a movie from Paul Newman and Robert Redford, who were like a super duo of the late 1970s. So it's 1973, but the movie is set in the 1930s. And the whole thing is they're going to go and they're going to rip off Robert Shaw, who is playing like an upper crust Boston guy here, which is really disturbing if you only know him as Captain Quint from Jaws. And the whole plot is just boilerplate. It's beautifully done. And I want to say, and I may be wrong, Stephen will probably correct me, but I want to say that this is where the term the Kansas City Shuffle comes from.
No,
But they
that's actually something that's been out there before.
It
okay,
was like an actual real thing.
an
Yeah, yeah,
actual thing.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it literally features tons of actors that you know. It features them doing some of the most ridiculous stuff. Believably, they literally create a fake betting parlor, and they build this and they fill it with people, and they have all of the people there in the betting parlor taking bets as though it's actually real, to the point where they're actually, they trick the guy into the whole thing. And what's really interesting to me is I'm a big believer in the theory that if you watch a movie with the same actors, it's fun to pretend they're the same people. And this is 1936, so you can figure this is what happened to Butch and Sundance after they jumped off the cliff in Bolivia. But I don't want to spoil it because I accidentally watched it several years ago and was like, oh my God, this is good. And I watched it again. And then I watched it again. And each time I caught new things, interesting bits and pieces. It really is, honestly, one of my favorite movies if I had to pick something that had Robert Redford in it. And I wasn't allowed to pick, like, Captain America, the Winter Soldier, because that movie's terrible.
Or
My
Cars.
number five, The Sting.
Yeah,
Cars, no, that was.
Sting is my number two on this. Just
Oh.
because it is really that great movie. My mom was, I probably still is in love with Robert Redford, so we saw that at the drive-in. Every time it was on TV, we had to watch it. The Sting is such a great setup, and when you look at heist films, just look at the genre of heist films or just a heist story in general. It's not just you're following a group of criminals. It's you're following how are they going to pull off this crime in extreme detail, and the Sting really goes into extreme detail on how they're doing this, planning on, and it's really Sting is also a revenge film because in the setup Robert Redford and his friend is a black man. I forget what his name is. I want to say Buford, but that's not it. They do the Kansas City Shuffle type thing on a one of the numbers runners for Shaw. And when they find out that they have like $10,000 that they've got from this illegal gambling establishment, Shaw's character goes and kills Robert Redford's friend. And so Robert Redford is tasked to go hook up with Paul Newman so that they can get revenge on Shaw's character. And so they do
Luther.
that throughout the whole piece. Luther, that's his name. And they just do a great job throughout the entire movie of letting you know in advance so that if you do watch it a second, a third, a fourth, 100th time, you will see all the little bits fall into place. You will see the double switch happen. You will see people who show up that you think have nothing to do with anything who suddenly become a big deal in the piece. So yeah, The
Yeah,
Sting is a great movie, and that is why it is in my
yeah.
number two.
I did the
Rodrigo,
math. Apparently, they hose Robert Shaw for over $11 million in
yeah,
today's money.
yeah.
That's crazy.
Rodrigo, please tell us your number four.
My number four is probably the most straightforward heist movie that I have on here.
Okay,
And that is Ocean's 11,
yep,
2001.
Hmm.
that is a really good film.
It
I
is.
do like that.
It's because it's like a very straightforward heist, right down to that part in heist movies where you think the good guys have lost and then it flips it, right? So,
Hmm.
um, an important part of the heist movie is not just the heist, but also when you reveal, like you were saying, Stephen, that other characters were in on it, that there were plans within plans, and that's a lot of fun. Um, Obviously a huge star-studded cast, along with a lot of character actors that do a great job in it, that have been around forever. Um, I would also like to hear just like throw out real quick, that there is a TV show that is a heist every episode called Leverage. I don't know if you guys have
Hmm.
ever seen it.
Now, you've talked
But
about
I
it
figured
before.
if
I haven't seen it.
yeah, if somebody likes heist movies, there's a very good chance that you'll like Leverage. It's like Ocean's 11 every episode, except with like 1/quintillionth of the budget.
Okay, cool. That's your number four. All right, my number four is a we would call these vibe movies because Christopher Nolan only does vibe movies. Movies that
Mhm.
evoke a certain feel. Maybe the story isn't as coherent as it probably could be, but it certainly evokes a vibe that gets you and draws you in deeper. Or maybe it draws you in deeper and deeper. Or maybe it draws you in deeper and deeper and deeper because Inception is about a heist wrapped inside of a heist, wrapped inside of a heist, because the concept is this man has information, and the only way that they can get the information out of this guy's head is to go inside of his dreams and use lucid dreaming to kind of evoke or get the information that they need. But they also realize that sometimes that information is buried so deep that they have to go inside of a dream, inside of a dream, inside of a dream in order to do what they need to do. And so Inception is it is a weird movie. It is very well done. It's beautifully done. Certainly, whenever we talk about Christopher Nolan and we talk about Wally Pfister, who is his cinematographer, you know you're always going to get something really beautiful, something that looks slick. Doesn't matter. I just watched Interstellar the other day. Again, doesn't matter if you're talking about space in Interstellar, or if you are talking about a Batman movie, or if you're talking about Tenet. Uh, Everything looks very slick and cool and big budget and big picture. And then when you layer in this weird sci-fi element of being able to go inside of people's dreams, it really makes you sit up. And then when you realize that the information they're looking for is just this very, very little thing, and yet they have to go through all of these layers and setups and everything to just get this one little bit of information, it makes Inception a movie to watch. And that is why it is my number four. Matthew, what do you? Oh, go ahead.
Inception is my number three.
Excellent. Why do you have it as your number three?
Because I like that part where like everything starts turning around and Tommy from Third Rock from the Sun is like, "Oh no!"
And they have to do the fight in the
And yeah, they
hallway.
have to keep fighting while the hallway rotates.
Yeah.
It's good times.
I mean that is a kind of a cool concept, right? So it's like when you're in dreaming space, you might be asleep for an hour, but inside your dream, what you're perceiving may be like 62 hours. Well, what happens if you
Yeah,
go inside of that dream where 1 minute now lasts an hour? And then if you go inside of a dream, that 1 minute inside that dream now is like a week in real time. And it's kind of cool to kind of mess
a,
with those
a lot
concepts and
of
ideas.
a lot of big sci-fi concepts. Um, and I think it's really what set up the expectation for Tenet, which I don't feel like Tenet delivered, but I don't think Tenet was trying to deliver that. Tenet was trying to do something else.
Yeah.
But I think that's a big part of the reason, is like because Inception had so many big, coherent concepts that people were like super into. Is part of the reason why maybe people look at Tenet and they're like, I can barely understand what these characters are even saying.
Yeah, I need to go back and revisit that because the first time I watched it, I was very much like, eh. But
Yeah,
I think I need to go back and watch it again just to see, what is Nolan trying to say. But certainly Inception is right there and they explain it. I mean, uh, save for, Tom Hardy or somebody turning directly to the camera and explaining word for word exactly what all these terms and concepts and everything mean. They spell out all the technology and everything in Inception so that even the average audience understands what's
Yeah.
going on. So yeah. Well, I'm glad that's your number 3. All right, Matthew, what do you have for your number 4?
It's interesting that you were both talking about Nolan as a director, because as a general rule, I'm not like the guy who goes, "Hey, directors, whatever," and I don't vibe with Nolan at all. Don't like his work; it makes me mad. Weirdly, I do like my number 4, partly because of the director, Ghost Rider's cousin, Sofia Coppola. Because I initially accidentally saw The Virgin Suicides one night at 3 in the morning, which is how I see movies. And then after that, I accidentally watched Lost in Translation one night. And, hey, that was really good. So when I had a chance to watch my number 4, The Bling Ring, I hoped that I would get some of the same things, some of the same feelings or some of the same expectations from The Bling Ring that I got from the previous 2 movies. And up to a point, I did. The Bling Ring, of course, is a heist movie in that it documents a bunch of heists based on real life, done by some of the most superficial, stupid, thoughtless teenagers you will ever see on planet Earth. And they literally just walked into houses around Hollywood and robbed from rich people. It's actually based, and you know what that means, based on a true story means somewhere in there may be a few grains of something interesting. But it's 6 kids who just wander around Hollywood stealing from people. And the movie spends very little time on that aspect of it, but when it does come up, it's one of the most fascinating parts of the movie. There's one whole sequence that's just a big, beautiful house with like a glass wall, a glass front, and you see them robbing the house. It's a wide shot of the whole house, and you see these idiots just running through and stealing, shoes and clothes and jewelry and cash and whatever they want from people. And then, of course, consequences eventually do come down. It is noteworthy for featuring Hermione with a California accent that only slips a couple of times. So, that's very impressive on Emma Watson's part. And when you honestly sit down and watch this movie, there are some seeds of what could be really, really interesting stuff here. And then they don't really delve into it the way I would like to. There's a little bit of it near the end where they start trying to figure out, why do these children feel like they can get away with anything they want? Why does no one have any morality? Why does no one have any sort of compass at all, other than, hey, let's make sure that people think we're rich and famous and cool and that, we can do whatever we want? So when you really get down to it, the heist aspect of it is not the focus. The aftermath of the heist is the best part. And of course, every week, folks, there is one entry on my list that I know when I'm writing the list, I'm going to hear Steven say that's not actually going to go on the list.
I
So
mean,
the
they don't
bling.
really focus on so the Bling Ring is actually based on a bunch of real burglaries by a bunch of teenagers. So it's true story. I think one
Yeah.
of the reasons why the movie has such a weird ending
Hmm.
is because the robberies ended in 2009 when all these kids were captured.
Right.
The movie came out almost right after that, like 2012, 2013. And so my
Yeah.
guess is there's a lot of stuff in here that
The game.
was not resolved yet. Like some of these kids were probably
Hmm.
still on trial when this movie came out. So there were probably things that had to be changed, or they didn't know the end of the story in order to bring that to light. But yeah, there were some big names that were robbed. Rachel Bilson, Paris Hilton, Orlando Bloom, Lindsay Lohan. In fact, I think Paris Hilton's
Megan
house was
Fox is.
broken into multiple times. So
Yes,
It's
they
an
kept going
interesting
back to
it's an
Lindsay's
interesting
house
movie.
and Paris's house. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting movie. And if I go and look on a list of heist movies on Wikipedia, it is listed. So I figure I can get this one in and move on. The Bling Ring, my number 4. Not a great movie, but one of my favorites in this particular genre.
All right. Rodrigo had Inception is his number 3. My number 3 is an Alfred Hitchcock movie, and it is the 1955 To Catch a Thief, based on a novel by the same name. Stars Cary Grant as a retired cat burglar who has to kind of redeem his reputation as a gentleman burglar by catching someone else who is using the same uh, motif and the same kind of calling cards that he does. And of course, he gets romantically entwined with Grace Kelly, and it all takes place on the French Riviera. It's a really fun movie that if you haven't seen it, it is not like, I mean, a lot of people think of Alfred Hitchcock and they think Psycho and they think Vertigo and they think, Rope or, all these other things, North by Northwest. But To Catch a Thief is this weird, not quite comedy, because I would say that there's silly moments in it because that's just who Cary Grant is. He plays a very affable, likable character. He's got the Riz for all you youngins who are listening to this show. Um, and of course, you've got Grace Kelly, who Alfred Hitchcock simply adores to the point of probably sexual harassment, revealed later on. But just this idea that here is the cat burglar who has to go and catch a cat burglar is a great setup, especially as Cary Grant has to reveal how he does a lot of his crimes, while at the same time not admitting to any of the crimes that he has ever committed. So if you've never seen To Catch a Thief from 1955, definitely take a moment to go and watch that movie. It's really good. There are some bits that don't really work well. There's a lot of rear screen projection stuff for driving, which at the time that's best you could do. I mean, it's not the best they could do, but it's what they could do easily. But just the stuff like on the rooftop stuff when the final act happens, the stuff that's going on at the masquerade ball, just the wooing of Cary Grant to Grace Kelly. It's just all good times. And I would say go check that out. That is my number 3, To Catch a Thief.
Nice.
Matthew, what do you have for your number 3?
My number 3 is a movie that I accidentally saw in a hotel room the first time we went to Nerdtacular. So probably 2014?
Oh, is that why I have that extra charge on my bill?
That was not me. Anyway, this movie I was paying for the hotel. It was the Motel 6 in Hayes, Kansas. It cost me $29.95, and it was worth every cent of $10. The other $19.95 I'll expect back as a check. But it is Now You See Me, which is a really, really interesting movie in the way that it is structured. Because if you look at the poster, it seems to imply that there are these 8 characters who are all equally important. And what it actually becomes is the story of 4 magicians, like stage magicians, who end up being called the Four Horsemen, working together under the control, theoretically, of Michael Caine and being followed by Morgan Freeman, all the while being chased by the FBI, led by the Incredible Hulk and Common. So, if you haven't seen the movie, first of all, it does have a couple of big twists in it. They may be spoilered in what I'm going to say, so sorry. But it's a really lovely movie because it's a movie that successfully lies to us, the audience, multiple times, and it tells you right up front, and it takes great pride in telling us about misdirection being the tool of the magic industry and how the misdirection is important, and then using that against us several times throughout the film. It is really interesting that they will show us almost every trick before the trick is done in the movie, and it still ends up being, a surprising part of the ongoing storyline, the ongoing heist, which involves robbing an incredibly rich person of a large amount of money and finding out that, oh, wait, maybe there's more going on here than there ever was because everybody in the audience has something in common. But if you get to the end of this movie, Here's my advice for you. There is, in fact, a second sequel in the works supposed to be released next year. I cannot speak to that movie. I can tell you that you should not watch the sequel, Now You See Me Too, for two important reasons. First and foremost, they did not entitle it Now You Don't. That is the natural name for a sequel to a movie called Now You See Me. The
Yeah.
fact that they didn't speaks to, I feel, first of all, a lack of creativity and a little bit of fear that the audience is stupid. Now, secondly, and most importantly, none of the female cast of this movie comes back for the sequel. None of it. They bring back almost every single male character in the film. They don't bring back the women. Now, there are reasons for that. I understand there are reasons for that. But it also irks the heck out of me because we get a character who is literally a replacement for a character who was in the first movie. And it's one of those moments where you're like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And it's a really frustrating movie. But if you can sit down and you take about 87 minutes and the face of Dave Franco doesn't fill you with the horrifying rage that it sometimes does me. This is a really good movie. It's a good heist. It's a good film. It even makes Jesse Eisenberg not horrible. And I don't mean that he's a horrible person, a horrible actor. He's a very good actor, but almost every time he's on screen, he's playing a character who's designed to be insufferable. His character in this movie is insufferable and charming. As Steven says, he's got the Riz. I love it when we get to say young people stuff. I think we should have everybody just take a drink of whatever they're drinking every time Steven and I use slang
I'm
20
trying
years
to
ago.
think. I thought it was another
Bet.
Jesse. I thought it was another film that he was in. That is another really good heist movie where he is card counting and has to work his way around card counting. And I thought it was called 21, but I don't see it in his IMDb resume. Maybe he wasn't in it, but I'm pretty sure
I
that
don't
there was
think
a
that's
card
Jesse
counting.
Eisenberg.
Now you deal me.
There is. I think I know what you're thinking about.
Yeah, it's
Because I
called
want to say
21. It's called
right,
21.
but he's not.
And who is the kid?
He's
Oh
not
no,
in
he's
it.
not in it. It's Jim Sturgis is in that. That's the character.
Yeah,
And it's got
and
that one.
you
It's
know
got
what?
that one
I don't blame
guy.
you.
It's got the Kevin Spacey in it as well. But yeah, that one's another one that's interesting. In how do these kids who are counting cards, how do they get out of their entrapment with a horrible person? So yeah. Okay, cool.
And
All right.
also Melanie Laurent, who's in this movie. I want Melanie Laurent to be in every movie. I want her to just have a part in every movie. Even if she just wanders in and says bonjour and walks out, I feel like it's worth the money to hire Melanie Laurent because she's amazing. Thank you.
Okay, we are moving into our number twos. Rodrigo, what do you have for your number two?
My number two is a movie that you might not think of as a heist movie, but it does kind of hit all of the bits that you would want from a heist. It has planning, it has the execution of the plan, it has like the things that go wrong in the middle of it. Um, but it's sort of a mutated version of that, where like some of the things that you would expect take a little bit of time actually take much longer. They're like stretched out because this is a franchise that has kind of mutated from a different type of movie into a heist movie, and that is the Fast and the Furious franchise. And I'm talking specifically about Fast Five, right?
Oh, Five
In
Fast, Five Furious, I believe is what that's called.
Five Fast, Five Furious, Tokyo Five. Um, actually, this
Except
one takes
the
place
Y
in
in
Brazil.
Tokyo is a 5.
It's a 5. That's right.
Yep. So this movie is most famous for having that absolutely bonkers thing where they pull a whole vault out and then drive it through the streets of, I don't know, Rio de Janeiro or somewhere. And it's just like absolute mayhem. It's just like so ridiculous. But by the time Fast Five rolls around, the Fast and the Furious has already transformed from kind of this like goofy, like summer, like non, like don't think about it movie into this like hyper reality where there's a bunch of guys, their superpower is cars, and they're gonna do some really ridiculous stuff. I believe this is a movie that introduces The Rock's character as
I
well.
want to say that as well because I think this is the last Furious movie that I watched.
Yeah. And that you can take however you want. I think personally, as someone who has casually enjoyed the Fast and the Furious movies, I think The Rock and Jason Statham's characters often, because of who they are, often like pull a lot of attention to themselves to the point where
Mhm.
they essentially like had to bud them off into their own movie. I
Right.
feel so they would stop bothering everybody else. Um, but if you want to watch again a heist movie where like the chase at the end isn't a minute, it's 15 minutes because that's the important part. And then some of the planning and other stages are like shortened. I would recommend Fast Five.
Very cool. All right. My number 2 was The Sting. Matthew, what do you have for your number 2?
My number two is generally believed to be a terrible movie. And while I wouldn't necessarily argue heavily against that, it has a lot of things going for it, even though it is the work of a first time director, Eddie Murphy. And that movie is Harlem Nights. Harlem Nights is, for me, remembered as the movie that reunited, well, not reunited, actually gave us for the first time Red Fox, Eddie Murphy, and Richard Pryor on screen together. It's actually the last movie Red Fox ever did, to my knowledge. And throughout this film, we are shown that Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy, who are sort of a father and son team, even though he's not his biological father, they're running a nightclub in Harlem in the 1930s. The thing that kind of pushes this above and beyond for me is the fact that it gets a really subtle acting performance out of Richard Pryor. Whatever else you can say about Eddie Murphy as a director, they get a really, really killer performance out of Richard. There's a moment where he's being threatened with death and he has this pleasant smile on his face. And the gangster tells him, if you don't do something about this, I'm going to kill you and I'm going to kill your son. And he keeps the pleasant smile on his face and he just says, is that all? And the guy yells at him again and he's like, I said, is that all? And it is so neat. It's a great moment in the middle of a movie that doesn't always hit its marks. They do kill Danny Aiello, which I feel like if you've ever seen a Spike Lee movie, that's just karmic retribution right there. And when you get to the end, it's another movie that manages to lie to me, but I don't get mad about it. It gets to the end and it does a couple of the little bait and switch where we move things around and you don't know which card has the queen until that last moment. Then you find out the queen was never on the board in the first place, but it's satisfying. If you have not seen Harlem Nights, be ready for an anachronism fest. Be ready for some F bombs and be ready for Della Reese, the angel from Touched by an Angel, to say, kiss my entire and then finish that sentence. That alone worth the price of admission for Harlem Nights.
Very cool. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we get to our number 1, I just want to take a moment to remind you that if you want to see this show continue far into the future and you love supporting independent creators like Major Spoilers, then you should become a patron of this podcast, a podcast patron at patreon.com/major spoilers. Just a couple of bucks a month, $2, $5, $10 or more keeps the show going and keeps us coming up with crazy topics like top 5 heist movies every time for you. So again, take a moment, head over to patreon.com/major spoilers, check out and see what we're offering and see how you can support independent podcasters today. We are now into our number 1s, and Rodrigo, what do you have for your number 1 heist movie?
My number one heist movie is a movie that I've seen a few times, and every time I see it, I find something else to like about it. It's also a movie that has been, unlike a lot of projects, greatly elevated by subsequent additions to it. I'm talking about Rogue One and the fact that
Hmm.
everybody and their mom loved Andor, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, I am also included in that. Your mother and I love Andor very much. So, Rogue One is a prequel to the Star Wars original trilogy, but it's not like the prequel trilogy. It's actually something that sits between both eras, closer really to the Empire era. Um, it features multiple cool characters. It is not a perfect movie. It has moments where it kind of loses me, but if you're coming at it from the Clone Wars and or Rebels series, there's going to be some Easter eggs for you. Um, when you get down to the heist, it is very good and very satisfying. I It's like because if you've seen the original trilogy, you know what happens. It's like, none of these characters are in it. So it's
Hmm.
like, yeah. And there's something to that. There's something about going in and just being like, oh, okay, cool. You're introducing me to all these characters. And I feel like it's the first time that modern Star Wars actually gives that to us, because when they started doing the Clone Wars, I was like, oh, they're introducing all these characters. Like, oh, here's Ahsoka. She's going to die because she's not in the original ones. And then
Right.
they don't kill her. In fact, lots of Jedi apparently made it all the way through the purges. They just were not involved in toppling the Empire after that, which I guess now that I'm older, I'm like, I guess it makes sense that, not everybody would have been like hop on the rebellion, or like some people would have been like, no, I don't want to deal with that. It's fair, it's fine. But Rogue One actually follows through with that, kills everybody. So, sorry, spoiler alert. And it is very satisfying. And if you are not someone who is like very satisfied by that, it then follows that up by bringing you into about a second and a half before uh, Star Wars: A New Hope starts. So if you really really wanted something for your Star Wars watch party that is gonna get you into it, start with Rogue One. Unless you're starting with the prequels, then just throw it in the middle there.
Yeah. After A New Hope, Rogue One is like my favorite Star Wars movie. I
Yeah.
think that is a fantastic movie, and the fact that I don't remember how audiences receive this. We'll talk more about that in the Major Spoilers podcast pre-show that you can only find exclusively at patreon.com/major spoilers. But I really, really like that movie. And apparently enough people also liked it that they're like, how do we bring back this one character when we killed him? And it's like, hey, let's do Andor. And there you go. And so, yeah, I agree. That's a really good pick there. I also think, even though it also got a lot of super negative press about it, Solo is another really good Star Wars heist movie.
Yep. Yep.
So there you go on
Sure.
that. All right. My number one is a comedy about four uh, feckless characters, small time thugs, small time gamblers, small time criminals, Eddie, Tom, Soap, and Bacon. And Eddie is a card shark, and he is going to go in and they are going to uh, gather together $100,000 and go play this poker game in which they hope to take the Mr. Big's money, Hatchet Harry, hope to get all of his money. But in turn, the game is rigged, and the four of them end up owing $500,000 to Harry, and they have 1 week to get it, or they're going to go after Eddie's father's bar. And so these four idiots decide that the best way they can do it is try to do as many heists as they can, including stealing a bunch of guns from an antique gun collector without realizing that two of the guns that they have are worth more than $1 million. and the plot twists, it turns. There may be a lot of deaths involved. It is incredibly funny. It is the first full feature film of Guy Ritchie. He would follow that up with Snatch, which some people will say is a much better movie than Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. I would agree with you because they've got bigger stars in there and Guy Ritchie knows what he's doing. But essentially, those two movies are the same thing, kind of scrubbed a little cleaner. Um, and they both have Jason Statham in them. And so if you watch Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch back to back, I guarantee you by the end of both of those movies, you will have the plot points confused because they are so similar to one another. One of them involves guns. Another one involves a giant diamond and a dog. So keep that in mind. But I really, really prefer Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels of the two, just because I think it's a little bit more raw. It's Guy Ritchie finding his place. If you are a fan of Guy Ritchie, of course, you've probably seen this. One of the more recent films that has gotten a lot of praise because it was also turned into a Netflix, Hulu, Prime TV series called Gentleman is also based on another movie that he did called The Gentleman. But go check it out. Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels is a riot and is a lot of fun for a heist movie. All right, Matthew, we are up to your number one. What do you have?
I think we may have opened with an Ocean's movie or very close to it. We're actually going to close with an Ocean's movie, not Ocean's 11, which is a very good film, not Ocean's 12, which is a film, but my favorite of the Steven Soderbergh versions of the Ocean's movie, Ocean's 13. And the reason that Ocean's 13 to me is superior, actually, there's two reasons. One, of course, is Eddie Izzard, who is absolutely amazing in this film. Eddie's amazing in everything they do. But the other reason is Ocean's 13 is the movie where rather than trying to get rich, rather than trying to stick it to the man, all of these guys have come together because Elliot Gould is sad and they are going to help out their friend. Ruben, of course, is one of the characters from the original film. Ruben has been strong armed into giving up his stake in a casino by an evil guy played by Al Pacino. And when you get to the Pacino casino, things start getting really crazy. And of course, Ruben has a heart attack, and all of the guys come back together. Not just the good guys, but also Andy Garcia, who was the villain in the first movie, comes back together. And they put together probably the goofiest and most entertaining heist of any in this film.
Is this the one with the earthquake hotel?
Yeah,
this is okay.
Yeah, this is the one with Super Dave. Super Dave
okay.
Osborne shows up, and we've heard about the character that Super Dave plays in the first two movies. Constantly, he's talked about because he's part of the backstory of one of the characters. When he pops up here, just chef's kiss, beautiful. But yeah, Ellen Barkin is in this, and of course, Steven loves her from Buckaroo Banzai.
Well, I love her from a lot of other things, but that's just one of them.
Oh, well, sure. This is, I think, they've come out and said this is the last movie that they're ever going to make because after this movie, one of the cast members, Bernie Mac, passed away. And now I think we've lost a couple of more people from the cast since then. And Soderbergh has said that he's talked with Pitt and Clooney and Matt Damon, and they're not going to make another one without the whole team. But it's just such a sweet movie. There's a point where people are coming and sitting next to Ruben's bed and talking to him, and one of the guys is really uncomfortable with it. It's like, no, just read him his cards, read him his letters, tell him we love him, give him something to live for. And then you get to the end of the film, and you find out, oh, something cool did happen. But yeah, it is. Kind of ridiculous, kind of wonderful, makes you not hate Casey Affleck, which is rare for me because I usually don't care for Casey Affleck. He, again, plays characters who are usually pretty reprehensible and plays them very, very well. But yeah, Ocean's 13, the best of the Ocean movies, probably my favorite of anything that you could call a heist movie, even though, as you can tell, my brain doesn't necessarily categorize things the same way as other people. I'm like, oh man, I don't even know what a heist movie is. Then I had to go looking for what people said a heist movie was. And I'm like, oh, well, this is a really good one. And that's why it's number one.
All right, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Our top 5 heist movies. What's on your list of top 5 heist movies? Did we offer up something new that you haven't heard before? Have you totally dismissive of each of our lists, saying, that's not a heist movie, here's a heist movie? Well, if you're in that latter category, then I would suggest you head over to our Discord server. You can join the Major Spoilers Discord server absolutely free, and then you can jump into the top 5 channel, and you can share your list of top 5 heist movies. Everyone will read the list. Everyone will comment on your list. Why? Because everyone loves a list. We will talk with you soon.
This podcast is copyright 2024 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.